Hello, I am Jan B, and this is my first Bible study. um, so I don't really know how I'm going to go about this, but I'm just going to start. I'm just going to begin because sometimes that is God instruction. You don't really know how. You just have to go, right? We're going to be studying from the book of Matthew, chapter 1. And we are going to break chapter 1 up into two sections. So the first section we are going to study is verses 1 through 16. And that section is basically the genealogy that leads to Christ. For a lot of people, I know for me especially, I when I first started and I was reading the Bible, reading all those names and who was born to who and who was the brother and the sister of who and all of that felt purposeless. It felt like it didn't matter, right? But it matters. It matters. And in the this Bible study, we are going to tell, especially this genealogy that's highlighted. Probably the same for all of them, but I just haven't learned the significance or importance of the others list. But this list, we're gonna dive into why it's important and who those people are that it is listing. Because it's all the famous people in the Bible. If you're a newbie, you're gonna learn the people that you want to know about, especially. And if you're like veteran in your studies, I don't know what you want to call it, then you're going to hear some people that you've heard of probably so many times and you know these stories and you're going to be like, oh yeah, that is how that connects. You're going to know this, but it's just something, probably something you didn't think about. So in the book of Matthew, it is the first book of the New Testament and it is one of four Gospels. So if you're a newbie, the four Gospels are Matthew, Luke, John, and Mark. If you're a veteran, you know who these four Gospels. And so in all of them, they tell about the life of Christ, but we're going to focus on the book of Matthew. And it's going to outline the genealogy that led to Christ, his birth, what was going on at the time of his early years in life. And then he hops on over into his adult life and tells us about his ministry and his teachings and his walk and the miracles he's performed. And then he also tells us about his death and then his resurrection and God's promises and things. Um, it also highlights his fulfillment of Old Testament prophecies. You'll see how he fulfilled some of those prophecies, and then we'll also reference the Testament scriptures in which he's fulfilling. So that's the overview for chapter 1 as a whole. Let's get into this genealogy of the first part. I want to tell you guys to stop here. If you haven't already read chapter 1, verses 1 through 16 of Matthew, go ahead and do that. It feels pointless, but it's not pointless. You need to have an understanding of what this is and how these people are connected because it was all a part of a grander plan that God had for our salvation. So, first and foremost, Christ is identified as the son of David and the son of Abram. And this establishes his rightful place in the lineage of the Israelite people. And it fulfills Old Testament promises regarding the Messiah's descent. You can reference these instances where he's named as the son of David and or well, it's prophesied that he would be the son of David or the son of Abraham. You can find them in Genesis 12:3 and Genesis 12:22 and 18, and in 2 Samuel 7:12 through 16. So, in addition to Abram and David, the genealogy also includes these significant patriarchs and kings, and they are Isaac, Jacob, Judah, Solomon, and also Joseph, who is not listed on here, but he's very, 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 very important. Um, these patriarchs and kings, this line showcases the royal and covenantal heritage of Christ and the fulfillment of God's promises to his people. So I didn't just want to bring them up for somebody who hasn't studied everybody much. There's a lot of story to each of these people. So these highlights of this little summary of who they are in one sentence, you might not understand, and that's okay. You can ask me questions if you want. But let's start with Abraham. He's the patriarch. So he is the founding father of the covenant of God's chosen people. So God chose him to father a nation through whom all nations would be blessed. So God chose one nation, one group of people, and those people are called the Israelites. And Abraham is the patriarch of that bloodline. Okay? And then there's Isaac, his son. And we're going to call him the son of promise. He is the miraculous heir of Abram. So Isaac was born to Abram and his wife in their late 90s, 100, right? And so that's what makes him miraculous. They didn't believe that they could have a child. And he's like what we call today, people call their rainbow baby, their miracle baby. So that's who he is. So through him, the covenant continues and demonstrates God's faithfulness. God was faithful to his word that Sarah, despite her age, would have this child, Isaac. And then there's Jacob, who is also called Israel. He's called Israel because God renamed him. He is the father of the 12 tribes. The 12 tribes are God's people. The 12 tribes are the nation that God chose. His name was changed by God, and it made him the direct progenitor of the nation. So it's very important. He's very important because this is where these tribes is what most of the 12 the most of the Old Testament is telling us and teaching us about the history of these people. And then there's Joseph. He is one of the sons of Jacob, the favorite son of Jacob, whose suffering and rise to power in Egypt preserved the family line. Joseph is one of a few people in the Bible who is the epitome of long suffering. The Bible tells us about long suffering, and these two people, Joseph and Job, they are the example of long suffering. So yeah, he ensures the survival of this nation, the nation of Israel. And then there's Judah. Judah is one of the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. And he is the son of Jacob as well. And his lineage is king, are the kings that would come. Specifically, the line of David would come from him, and ultimately Christ, who is also a king. So all the kings come through this line. And then you have David, who is king, and he's the shepherd king of Israel, and whom God promised an eternal dynasty, and centralizing the royal and messianic line in Judah, excuse me. And then there's Solomon, King Solomon. He is the builder. He is the son of David, and he built the temple. And he represents the peak of Israel's kingdom, but he also was a very, 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 very sinful man. He was like all of us, and because of his sins, though, there was consequences, and it was the division of the 12 tribes. Okay, also included in this genealogy are women. Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba are the ones we're going to highlight. In the genealogy, it signifies the breaking of social norms. Scholars say it emphasizes God's grace in the diverse lineage through which Christ would come. So let's talk about them. Tamar is a Canaanite widow who, by rightfully seeking an heir for Judah's line, became an ancestor of David, and she secured the messianic lineage. And then there's Rahab. She's also a Canaanite, but she's a prostitute of Jericho. And by her faith, she protected Israelite spies, and she was spared. She married into Judah's tribe and became an ancestor of David as well. And then there's Ruth, who is a Moabite widow, whose loyal love led her to Bethlehem, where she became the great grandmother of King David. She was a Gentile, but she grafted into the royal line. And when we say royal line, we mean the Israelite line, bloodline. And then there's Bathsheba. She is the wife of Uriah, whom David wronged. And when they say wronged, they mean David slept with his wife, who was Bathsheba. So Bathsheba and David committed adultery. And she became the mother of Solomon, and she ensured the Davidic covenant and messianic lineage would continue. So all of them are connected to David. David is a very prominent figure um, and marker for this messianic lineage. Okay, so there's three segments of the genealogy. So the first segment is Abraham to David, and then there's from David to the Babylonian exile, and from the exile to Jesus. This structure highlights the transitions in Israel's history and God's faithfulness throughout. Israel has a long history with many ups and downs and transitions, and so these three segments highlights high mark transitions in their storyline. Also, there's 14 generations in each of those segments. So Abraham to David, that's 14 generations. David to Babylonian exile, 14 generations. In from the exile to Christ, that's 14 generations. Okay, let's talk a little bit about why the significance of these genealogies. First, the genealogy establishes Jesus' legal claim as a descendant of David. It fulfills the prophecy that the Messiah would come from David's lineage. Remember, I told you about those. I think it's in Second Samuel and Genesis that it was prophesied that he would come. He would come from David's line. So it does that, and it validates his authority as king. And then there's the connection to Abram's promise. Again, reference in Genesis and Second Samuel. I think David is Second Samuel and Abraham is Genesis. So by linking Jesus to Abraham, the genealogy reaffirms the promise made to Abram regarding his descendants and that the blessing would come through them. So it highlights the covenantal relationship between God and his people, the Israelites, the nation that he told Abraham about. The inclusion of women, again, this just further illustrates God's grace and the breaking of societal norms. Back then, women weren't really they were superior. But so it just emphasized that God's plan encompasses all and whoever he decides and wants to, regardless of the things that we think separate us or the things that we think others somebody else, regardless of sins, because he used sinners, he used men, he used women, all of the people. He used Gentiles, he used Jews or Israelites. So yeah, God's faithfulness through the generations. The genealogy showcases God's unwavering faithfulness throughout generations as it traverses through the highs and lows of Israel's history. And this just illustrates his commitment to his promises and that he had a plan all along and that his plan will be fulfilled no matter what. So that is the summation of chapter 1, verses 1 through 16 of the book of Matthew. We will come back for the second half, part 2, to study the rest of the verses for chapter 1. Thank you for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. I appreciate you coming, and I'll see you next time.